Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this big green beast is the Genesis GV80. Now Genesis first arrived in the UK back in 2015 with the Hyundai Genesis Saloon, and it was meant to take on the likes of the BMW 5 Series and Audi A6. However, those kind of buyers were never going to look at a Hyundai badge, so the Genesis was very quickly killed off. However, Genesis started to grow in the US, and they knew that if they were going to come back to the UK and Europe, they'd have to come back with some SUVs, because they are the biggest selling segment here. So in 2021, they came back with 4 new models: the G70 and the GV70 SUV, and the G80 and GV80, which is what I've got here. Now, I've had this flagship GV80 for a week, and I'm going to let you know if it can finally take on the Germans. Now, when it comes to the GV80's styling, yes, if you're building a flagship, it's got to make a visual impact, and the GV80 definitely does that. Now, yes, I have had somebody ask me if it was a Bentley, and that can be easily forgiven, because a gentleman called Luke Donkelvock is kind of responsible for that, because he did used to work for Bentley, and he now works for Genesis. So he's definitely put some of his Bentley ideas into the design of this GV80, and you can't really say that's a bad thing. I mean, you could call this a baby Bentayga, but I actually think that the GV80 is a gorgeous looking car. It's got real nice proportions to it. It looks European as well, and it actually is very bold and imposing. I've had a lot of people giving this car a second glance. Now, of course, yes, we've got a massive grille up front, and that is actually to mimic the shield on the badge of the Genesis. And then we've got these quad headlights, which we're seeing on all Genesis models, and that's to mimic the wings on the Genesis badge. So it really does stand out. Now, on this luxury line, I have got 22-inch alloy wheels, which look wonderful, but we'll talk about the ride later on. But let me know what you think of the GV80 in the comment section below. But you know what? I do think it really stands out, and in this Cardiff Green, looks bloody gorgeous. But I think that's enough of looking at the exterior of the GV80. Let's see what they've done with the interior. Interior quality is really good in here as well. There is leather everywhere on top of the dash, on the main part of the dashboard as well, on top of the doors and on the door panels also. What I love as well is also on the center console, so if you are on a long journey, you can rest your knees against them and you're not going to feel uncomfortable. Then on the center dashboard, what was a real nice surprise is that I was expecting black piano plastic, and we haven't. This is actually real wood, and I just love the look of it in this GV80. It just adds a sense of class to the interior. Not like, say, Lexuses of old, where you used to have the kind of heavily treated wood, where it was very shiny. This just feels really nice to touch, and as I said, just adds that element of class to the cabin. As a whole, I think the design just looks very elegant, not necessarily minimalistic, but it does look very well screwed together and just feels like a lovely place to be. Cubby spaces in the GV80 for the most part are actually really good, apart from the door pockets. They just seem a bit too small, and you can only get a small bottle of drink in there. Plus they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. However, Genesis do make up with it with the center console. So up front, we've got a lovely lid here that when you push it back, and it is really well damped, it exposes the wireless charging and 2 USB charging inputs. And what I love is that I can put a phone in there and have it charging, and I can close the lid and you can't see my mobile phone in there, so I can leave it in there and no one can see it. So I really do love that feature. Then on the left hand side, we've got another lid which reveals 2 cup holders, which I really love the quality, because it's actually knurling around the edge of it. We got little bits of metal on there on the little plastic grippers, but it is of a decent size and it is actually rubber lined, so that is a feature I do like. Then we have got the center armrest, which opens up to show actually a really big storage area. We have got a little tray as well, which has been perfect for my mints this week, but there's no kind of charging inputs or anything like that. It is just a storage place, but I do love the fact that it is lined with fabric, so loose items don't really rattle around in there, so I do love that feature. Then underneath the center console as well, we have actually got a little bit of extra storage. It is rubber lined again. I do love the texture of it as well, and you have got a 12-volt socket. So I do love that handy feature that you can perhaps put a couple of mobile devices down there, but you can at least charge one of them. And then finally we have got the glove box, which is lockable, which I do like. It is lined with fabric, so loose items won't rattle around. However, in typical Hyundai Group fashion, the book pack and everything does take up quite a lot of space. However, you can take those out, perhaps chuck them under the seat or leave them at home. But it does mean then you've got a decent sized glove box, and again, I love the fact that it's lockable. And then finally, we've got a little space up here to put your sunglasses, so that's nice and handy. Something I really do like about the GV80 is that there's actually a perfect mix of physical and touch sensitive buttons in here. Now when it comes to the physical buttons, we've got some shortcut buttons here for the infotainment system, a couple of physical knobs here for your dual zone climate control. Just behind there on the center console, we've got a couple more controls for the infotainment system, particularly in the media setting. We've got a trackpad as well as another rotary knob there for your infotainment display, another rotary knob for your gear select, and then we've also got your auto hold there as well. And then again, we've got another rotary knob, and this operates your drive mode select. So you have your eco, normal and sport, but you can also go into terrain mode, so you can actually operate it for mud, snow and sand. So you can go off-road in the GV80 if you'd like, but that does mean that you risk scratching those 22-inch alloy wheels, so just be aware of that. We've also got hill descent control, we have got your parking sensor control, and we have got your 360-degree button control. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have got your electric handbrake, we've got your boot open, and we have got your start-stop button there as well. Now, when it comes to the steering wheel, it actually feels really lovely in your hands, and again, the quality of the leather is wonderful. But we have got some physical buttons on here as well. So on the left hand side, they operate your media and communication controls, and on the right hand side, they operate your adaptive cruise control and also the driver data information display. And then when it comes to the touch sensitive side, well, here in the center, where actually the dual zone climate control is, you can operate some of the functions using the little screen there. It's not just for presentation. And what I love is that I've got things like heated and ventilated seats. I can actually pick the direction as well. And it just feels really easy and intuitive to use. Genesis, I think, have really done their homework in what works well in that kind of setup. What I also love as well is that I can actually control the climate control in the back of the car. So perhaps if you've got young children and you don't really want them messing about with it, you can turn on their heated seat and you can adjust the temperature as well. So I really do like that feature if you have got young children sat in the back of the Genesis. But yeah, when it comes to the kind of touch sensitive buttons and the physical buttons, I think there really is a perfect mix in here. Now, when it comes to the infotainment system, you are greeted with a 14.5-inch display, which surprisingly also comes as a touchscreen, which is actually really handy, particularly when I've been using Apple CarPlay. But I've also been using this touchpad and rotary dial as well, and it's actually just really intuitive. It's very easy to use, especially when on the move. The responses are very quick, and it just seems to be a really nice infotainment system to use. It just feels very logical, very easy to use, and the graphics as well are very crisp and clear. I've had no issues whatsoever using it, and I have enjoyed using this trackpad and little rotary dial, and I love all the knurling on there as well. I mean, it just adds to that kind of baby Bentley feel to the GV80. So yeah, I've been really impressed by it, and what I've loved is even with Apple CarPlay on, it doesn't take up the whole screen, and you end up having like a little side menu where you can look at things like the weather, or you can look at other functions that the car can give you. So that's something, again, I really liked in the Genesis, and yeah, it's just something I hope that will kind of feed its way down onto Hyundai and Kia models in the future, because I really do love that infotainment system. Then finally, in front of the steering wheel, we have got a 12.3-inch digital dashboard display, and it is part of the Innovation Pack. And I will put down in the description below what comes as part of that pack, and also the cost of it at the time of recording. But what I like is it has got that 3D display where you've got the little sensors that monitor where your pupils are, so it does slightly turn when you're looking at the dials. However, what I have noticed is that if I am driving on a sunny day, particularly if the sun's in front of me, I don't think the sensor can see my pupils if it's kind of reflecting the sun. So on a couple of occasions I have seen the screen flicker a bit because it can't quite detect where I'm looking. But that's not really much of an issue because you can actually go to a two-dimensional display, which does look a little bit sharper because it doesn't have to have any animations with it, and it just basically means you can have your cake and eat it. And it's very easy to operate the driver data menus because you have got the controls on the right hand side of the steering wheel. So again, it's very easy to operate when you're on the move. But all in all, it's just a really lovely place to be here in the front of the GV80. And I do think this is going to cause the Germans to step up their game a little bit because, well, I actually kind of prefer this interior to some of its other rivals, but that's just me personally. But you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the front of this GV80. Let's see what it's like in those back seats. Sat in the back of the GV80, it's actually really nice and spacious back here. Now that driver's seat is not set to my driving position, it's actually moved back a couple of inches to allow easy exit out of the car, but I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room, and headroom is pretty good as well. I actually think you can get a couple of 6-footers sat in the back of the GV80, and they'll be nice and relaxed and comfortable for a long journey. Also, when it comes to cubby spaces, it's actually pretty good back here. We've got some decent sized door bins. You can get a small to medium sized bottle of drink in there. We have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. And then we've also got your centre armrest here with a couple of extra cup holders, which is really handy. And I do like the way that they actually stick out of the armrest, so you can rest your arm on there and you're not going to knock a bottle of drink. So I do love that function. And it's not devoid of features back here. Now on the windows, which are of a really big size, unfortunately they don't open all the way down. We have got some blinds, which is perfect for keeping the sun away from your kids. We have on the back of the armrest, we have got a couple of air vents. We've got your tri-zone climate control, and as I mentioned, the front driver and passenger can also operate this as well. And we've got a 12-volt socket and 2 USB charging inputs, which is really handy. Then comes the flexibility sat in the back here of the GV80. As you can probably tell from these seats already, yep, I can recline them, and yeah, I'll be really nice and relaxed for a long journey. But not only that, I can also slide the seats forward and back, so it means I can increase the boot capacity and just kind of get any large bulky items in there. So yeah, that is something I really do like about the GV70. It's got loads of spec in here, loads of kit. You can actually go for a second seat optional comfort pack, and I will put that down in the description below, but essentially means you can have heated seats and ventilated seats here in the back of the GV80, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, I'd have no issues whatsoever being sat back here in the GV80 for a long journey. And I do think as well you could get maybe 3 adults at a push, but easily 3 kids. And finally, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats. And what I like is that there's no plastic covers, and actually the metal bars are pretty easy to get to. So affixing a child's seat should be pretty easy. But yeah, it's just lovely and spacious, it's light and airy, and well, it's just a really nice place to be. So I think on that note, it's time to leave these rear seats and see what it's like in that boot. Now, before I open the boot of the GV80, I do want to mention the fact that you can get this car with either 5 or 7 seats. But if you do go for 7 seats, it actually doesn't change the shape or size of the car. Unlike, say, a Lexus RX, where if you want to go for the 7-seater version, you've got to go for the RXL. So I've got the 5-seater version of the GV80, which means I'm going to have a pretty big boot back here. So, opening the boot of the GV80 presents you with 735 litres of space, which is just massive. And what I love as well is that it has a nice square wide load area. You can easily get a few suitcases and loads of weekend bags into the back of the GV80, and it's just, yeah, it's just absolutely massive. Now, it's not perfect. I will admit that the boot lip is quite high, but it is flat, which is really handy. And when it comes to kind of features and that, well, you have the usual features. So you have got your tethering hooks, which are really sturdy. You've got a 12-volt socket. And if you do want to get the rear seats down, then we have got a couple of buttons on the side to get them down. And you've got an almost flat load area. So loading large bulky items will be an absolute doddle for the GV80. In fact, with all the seats down, you've actually got around 2,150 litres of space, which is almost van-like. And also it's not devoid of underfloor features either. Now firstly, I have got this carpet in here, which is really handy, but if I look underneath the boot floor, the first thing we find is actually the tonneau cover fits underneath here, which means again you can load large bulky items and not have to leave that in the garage. And then if I lift up the boot floor further on, you've actually got space for a space saver spare wheel. We have got some netting and we've got your tyre inflation kit. And then just on the right hand side, we've got a little bit of extra cubby space and a bit of netting. So yeah, when it comes to the practicality side of the GV80, particularly in 5-seater mode, yeah, it's absolutely spot on. And I've been really impressed by it. But you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the practical side of this GV80. Let's take it for a drive. So once you get driving in the GV80, first impressions are really positive. Now the first thing I will mention is the fact that the GV80 does feel like a big car. So it can be a little bit daunting if you've not driven a car of this size before. You do sit really high up, you've got a lovely commanding view of the road ahead, but the one thing I've noticed is that the bonnet does kind of slope away. So the fact that I've got things like front parking sensors and a front camera does help when kind of gauging the GV80 size. Now speaking of visibility, as I said, I've got a great view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are surprisingly thin and I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions, and if I look over my shoulder I actually find that the C-pillar isn't too thick either. As a result, all-round visibility in the GV80 is really good. I mean, even rear visibility is excellent and it's not obstructed by the rear seat headrests. The wing mirrors are of a decent size and they have got blind spot monitoring, but because I've got the innovation pack, I've also got the blind spot cameras. Now this is a little thing that we're seeing kind of going down onto Kias and Hyundais, and I really do love that feature. And the actual display on the screen is really crisp and clear. So all in all, first impressions of the GV80 are really positive. It is a big car, but it is very comfortable and it is also very easy to drive. Now there are two trim levels in the GV80 range. There's the entry level premium line and the top of the range luxury line, which is what I've got here. Now personally, I would actually recommend going for the premium line and then just adding some of the option packs on top of the vehicle to kind of give yourself a bit of extra kit in that. Now the reason being is that the premium line comes with 20-inch alloy wheels. I know that sounds actually pretty big, but as I've mentioned already, this luxury line has got 22-inch alloy wheels, and when we get to the ride part of the review you'll find out that yes, they look lovely, but they don't exactly help when it comes to ride quality. So I'd recommend going for the premium line and let's look at kind of, yeah, getting those 20-inch alloy wheels and just getting a little bit more in terms of ride comfort. What I'd personally say to Genesis, if you can, is that if you do go for the luxury line, have the option to go for the smaller alloy wheels, or perhaps have a different design but slightly smaller, and just do it as a no cost option, because that way you can take advantage of that extra bit of ride comfort. But yeah, even though I've got the luxury line and those 22-inch alloy wheels look wonderful and they really do fill up the arch, yeah, as you're probably aware already, they are going to have an effect to the ride quality. So that's why I recommend the premium line. Now, when it comes to powering the GV80, Genesis are pretty old school. There are two engines available, one petrol and one diesel. Now I've got the petrol here. It is a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder turbocharged unit, producing about 300 brake horsepower and 422 newton meters of torque. Now that power goes down to all four wheels, so that means that this big 2.2 ton SUV will go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.9 seconds, so it is actually pretty brisk. Also, that power goes through an 8-speed torque converter gearbox, which is actually designed and built by Genesis themselves, and as a result, well, it's really lovely. It's very smooth, it goes through the gears seamlessly, you can barely hear the changes. it's just an all-round really good day-to-day gearbox. Now, yes, if you do kind of suddenly put your foot down, you can catch the gearbox off guard, and there's a tiny bit of hesitation, but when you're just driving around day-to-day, it just seems to be in the right gear, and as a result, it just adds to that lovely cushioned ride and driving experience. So yeah, in terms of the engine and the gearbox, it's a really nice combination. However, there is a drawback, and that comes in the form of MPG. See, this is just a petrol car. There's no hybridization at all with it. I've hit 30 MPG, which I've been really proud of, and you know, I would celebrate that occasion. However, petrol prices have kind of gone through the roof here in the UK because we are living in a bit of a crazy time. So now, as I mentioned, of course, there is a diesel available. In fact, I did ask Genesis for the diesel to review because in my mind, I kind of felt that that would be the kind of more suitable engine to the GV80. However, that car was unavailable, but if you'd like me to review the diesel version of the GV80, let me know in the comments section below. So, what's the ride, refinement and handling like in the GV80? Well, ride-wise, for the most part, it's lovely. It deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. At speed, it does feel pretty planted and settled. But of course there is the big drawback, which is those 22-inch alloy wheels, which means that the low-speed ride is fidgety and you do feel all the bumps and imperfections coming into the cabin. If you hit any big potholes or manhole covers, yeah, you are going to feel those big booms and vibrations, which is a little bit disappointing in this type of car. But when you get up to speed, you do find that the car does settle down and it is very relaxing to drive on a long journey. It's just, again, because of those larger rims, yeah, you do feel some of the little imperfections on the road just kind of coming into the cabin. But it's not uncomfortable, but it's just something that is there. And if you go look at something like an Audi Q7 or a BMW X5, you will find that the ride quality is perhaps just a little bit better because, you know, those brands, they've had a few years to just get that ride quality kind of tuned up a bit over the years. But other than that, it's still actually really decent, and it's again why I recommend going for the premium line rather than the luxury line trim, because you get those slightly smaller alloy wheels, so you get more tyre sidewall there to just kind of take in some of those bumps and imperfections. Now, when it comes to the refinement in the GV80, I am really impressed by it. In fact, you can clearly tell that Genesis have worked their magic on this car. I mean, it is the flagship after all. But driving around day to day, there's very little to no engine sound coming into the cabin, unless you put your foot down, in which case, yes, you do hear it in the background. There's no wind noise coming off the wing mirrors or the A-pillars. In fact, the only intrusion into the cabin is tyre roar, but you have to drive on a poor bit of road surface in order to expose it. Now, the Genesis has got this kind of active sound that comes into the cabin to kind of cancel out any of the exterior noise coming into the cabin, and I actually think it works. I mean, it does feel like a really refined car. And then, as I said, as you're just driving over a bit of poor tarmac, you just get that road noise coming into the cabin. However, I've not really been experiencing road noise coming into the cabin because, well, I've had my car linked up to the Apple CarPlay and I've been playing my tunes, and this car is fitted with the optional Lexicon sound system, and it's one of the best sound systems I've experienced reviewing cars for Auto Bears. It's just epic in how it delivers the sound. There's lots of customization in how you want the sound to be presented in the cabin. But I had a friend with me who loves kind of singing and doing music in the background in his spare time, and he was just in awe of it. I had certain artists and bands playing, and you couldn't pinpoint where the voice was coming from. You couldn't pinpoint where the orchestra was. You know, it kind of felt like you were at a live concert. You kind of knew that, you know, the sound was in front of you. You had the cellos and the bass on one side, you had the violins on the other. There was also a drummer going, and you could hear the drums going around me like a 360 effect. And it was just, it made the hairs on the back of my neck and on my arms tingle the first time I experienced it. And then when you kind of go into the menus and you kind of tweak that sound system and that experience to how you want it, yeah, the benefits are huge, and it is one of the options I definitely recommend. especially on a long journey, just having my music playing and having all the driving aids and everything help me kind of just take the strain and stress out of driving on a long journey. This is a perfect cruising car. When you're on the kind of motorways and that, you can just let the car do its thing. It's got a highway assist mode where it'll help you change lanes when you indicate, keeps you in lane as well, and it just does a lot of the work for you. It takes a lot of that stress out of driving on a long journey. So yeah, when it comes to the refinement side, yes, you get a little bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin, but if you've got the Lexicon sound system, you don't hear it at all. You just hear the wonderful music that you're listening to, and that's one thing I do love about certain cars and testing cars. I love a good sound system. When the day comes when I can have a Bentley for a week and experience the name sound system, which is classed as the best one you can get in a car, that will be the cherry on top of the cake. But at the moment, this is the best sound system I've tested in a car. I really do love it. So what's the handling like in the GV80? Well, as you can tell from the look of it, it's not a big sporty SUV like a Porsche Cayenne. It's not taking on that car. This is going up against the likes of the BMW X5, the Mercedes GLE, and also the Audi Q7 if you go for the 7-seater version. So as a result, this has really been designed to be wafty and comfortable and do a long journey across the country and come out the other end feeling lovely and relaxed. It's not meant to kind of, pull you into the seat and hug you, with the side bolsters and Recaro seats. But it has got the drive modes that you would expect in this type of car. You have got normal, eco and sports, and when you do put it in sport mode, the side bolsters do pinch your kidney. So I do love the fact that it is, yes, trying to be sporty in that sense, but it's not going to put the smile on your face like a Porsche Cayenne will. It's not that type of car. It's more of a gimmick. I mean, yes, the dials do change when you put it into sport mode, but you know what? Eco mode, I actually think the dials look the coolest. They look really futuristic. And then in normal, you've got this old school look about them. But when it comes to kind of day-to-day driving, the handling is fine. It's really nice and light. It's perhaps a little over-assisted, but it doesn't feel like it's too detached like a video game. But what it means as a result is that it is really easy to park, and low-speed manoeuvring is actually really good. And I actually like the turning circle in this as well. It has got a bit of a whip about it, which I do like. But yeah, in terms of the handling being kind of best in class, something like a BMW X5 is going to feel a bit more sporty and better to drive and more rewarding to drive. But again, that's not the point of the GV80. So in terms of the handling, it's perfect for everyday driving. You'll have no issues whatsoever. It is nice and light, and it does make this 2.2 ton SUV feel quite light when it comes to parking, which is actually what you do want. Now, as well as having the normal drive modes, we've also got some terrain modes, which I've actually come across in the likes of the Kia Sorento. So we have got things like mud, we've got snow, and we've got sand. So that will definitely help with terrain like this, where you definitely don't want to get yourself in a bit of a pickle. However, because this is the luxury trim, and again, we've got those 22-inch alloy wheels, that's just the parking sensors there, it does mean that you don't really want to be taking this car off-road. So I'd probably say, again, trim-wise, if you're going to go for something with, a bit of off-road clearance and you are looking to take your car off-road, then yes, definitely the premium trim is the one to go for and not this luxury, because I really don't want to scratch those alloy wheels. I mean, they look expensive. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points I've experienced living with the GV80 this week? Well, highlights have definitely been the looks. This car stands out because Genesis are still very new to the UK, so as a result there's not many of them about, and especially there's none near me. So as a result, I've been getting particularly JLR and Mercedes drivers giving the GV80 a second glance, and I can understand why. It's got a huge amount of presence. I've been asked already once if it is actually a Bentley, which I think is a nice compliment to the Genesis, because you can tell, yes, there's a Bentley designer involved in the design of the GV80, but calling it a baby Bentley as well, I actually think is a bit of a compliment, and I don't think Bentley would be too harsh in terms of criticising that compliment either. I think they would actually kind of welcome it. And then you've got the interior, which is just made out of really lovely materials. It feels very comfortable, very well screwed together, and should definitely stand the test of time. Then we've got the technology. I mean, this car is just jam-packed full of tech when it comes to things like comfort and convenience, and then we've got safety. Now that does lead me on to one of the first niggles I've come across in the GV80, which is the safety systems can be a little bit oversensitive. You can find yourself kind of straying over a white line and it gives you a beep, but because the GV80 is quite wide, it does kind of move you over onto the other side of the road, and the next thing you know, you'll have the left side warning going off as well. On kind of day-to-day driving, if you're not on the motorway, you might find it a little bit kind of annoying as it beeps at you inside the cabin, but if you're on the motorway, no, you're absolutely fine. They're really lovely, and it just takes a huge amount of strain and stress out of doing a long distance drive. So that's just something to be aware of in regards to the safety systems on the Genesis. And then we've got things such as the fuel consumption. So that's something, like I've mentioned earlier, I'm not going to class it as a major niggle because I've already covered it, but I would just like to say to Genesis, try and develop a plug-in hybrid version of the GV80, because I think, especially now with diesel cars and petrol cars kind of almost coming up to the final straight of their lifetime in terms of being developed and made and manufactured, a plug-in hybrid would really stand out, and it would actually help the GV80, especially when you've got cars like the Kia Sorento and the Hyundai Santa Fe with plug-in hybrid technology. You can easily put that onto the GV80. It shouldn't be too much of an issue when it comes to the midlife facelift. So that's just something that I would personally say to Genesis. But other than that, no, I've had no issues whatsoever. Yes, it's a big car, but I've got all that safety tech, so it actually means that manoeuvring it in a tight spot has been absolutely fine. I've had no issues. The steering, as I said, is nice and light, so it is easy to park. But yeah, I've not really come across any issues with the GV80, just apart from that slightly oversensitive safety system. But yeah, I've been really impressed by it, and I think it's now time, well, we go on to the conclusion. So what are my thoughts on the Genesis GV80? Well, I really like it, and from Hyundai Group to take on the Germans, I think they've done a really good job in terms of the looks and the quality of the materials on inside. I think they've done a brilliant job, and I think this is actually one of the nicest interiors in its class. I was hugely surprised as well with the infotainment system. It's really responsive, and again, you kind of got this Lexus feel about it, but it is nothing like a Lexus. It is so much better than that, and it's very intuitive and easy to use. And it's just the fact of we've got all the little features that we get from Hyundai Group nowadays, which you kind of expect to get from something like Skoda. I actually think Skoda might be losing their touch a little bit, because all those little simply clever things are actually now coming from Hyundai Group. But as a premium brand with Genesis, I think they can take on the Germans. I think they can take on JLR and Lexus and Volvo as well. And you'll have something different. You'll have something that stands out. Genesis are very much about the customer and giving you a very personal experience. They don't have any main dealers in the UK. Everything's done via kind of like a customer centre where you go and experience the car at kind of like a nice... It's a nice showroom, but it's not a traditional showroom. You get an invite to it, you get to shown around the cars, and you get to experience what it's like to be a Genesis customer. So they are going above and beyond. They have looked at the other premium manufacturers out there and seeing what they're doing and also what they're not doing. And as a result, yes, you have got this very personable experience with them. Because if someone handed me the keys to a Lexus RX, a Genesis GV80, and perhaps say a Mercedes GLE, I'm taking the Genesis. It just looks better, it feels better on the inside, and it just feels really special. For a first big flagship from the Korean brand, I think they've done a brilliant job, and I can't wait to see the future. I can't wait to see the G90 in the metal, because that's something that's coming up now, and that's going to be taking on the likes of a 7 Series and an S-Class. And just going by the looks, you can tell that's going to be pretty special. So yeah, the GV80 is a brilliant start as a flagship for Genesis. Yes, it's flawed, but I still really like it. It's just a shame at the moment they're in the southeast of England. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Genesis GV80 SUV. As always, don't forget to hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the Genesis and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. As always, I'm on all the social medias, so please follow me on there as well for additional content and videos. And of course, guys, keep safe, maintain your social distancing, wear a mask, wash your hands, stay safe out there, and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care everybody, and bye bye. This is love.